3, 2, 1, 0.
Hi, this is Tyler Dawn Rosenquist. If you're grown-ups, you can call me that. If hopefully not the whole thing, but if you're one of my kids, you can call me Miss Tyler because doggone it, Rosenquist is just too long a name to deal with. Glad I didn't grow up with it. Anyway, this week on Context for Kids, we are going to cover Torah portion Noach. It is the second Torah portion in the yearly cycle. And I hope that you caught last week's Torah portion, Bereshit, in the beginning because I had a lot of fun doing it. If you didn't, you can always go back into my videos and take a look at that. Anyway, so this week, like I said, is Noach. In English, his name is known to us as Noah. And we find the story of Noah in Genesis 6:9 to 11:32. And I hope your family is going to be learning about that this week because I'm going to teach you some really, really cool things to impress your friends and neighbors with. All right, so creation we talked about last week, and everybody says, everybody's got a creation account. Well, everyone, for the most part, has a flood account too. Does that mean that the flood was made up? No. Maybe it means there was really a flood and people told stories about it. These things go both ways. Anyway, while researching my next book, I've been spending the week studying flood myths. And like the creation myths, talking about creation, the way the flood myths go tell us a lot about how people viewed their gods and the kind of gods people thought they were. So our God is perfect, benevolent, caring, and their gods were pretty stinking messed up. I was just reading one of the accounts out of ancient Mesopotamia called the Atrahasis epic. And remember last week I mentioned how the gods got tired of doing all the work, the creating of the earth, so they made humans to be slaves? Yeah, the gods had been like digging the Tigris and the Euphrates, which are heck long. I get tired too. So, they created the humans to do the digging for them. So the story goes on, and we find these humans, the population is just growing and growing and growing, and now the gods can't get any sleep because of all the racket. Can your parents maybe relate to that? I know I can. Anyway, so the gods send a bunch of disasters and they start wiping out humans and but they keep coming back, and so finally they say, we're just gonna flood the whole earth, get rid of them all. But then, and they would have gotten away with it too, except for this one god warned his favorite slave, human, and he and his family escaped by building a boat. We see this with the Chinese too. They have a flood account where 8 people escape in a boat. Gosh, 8 people in a boat. Maybe this really happened. So, anyway, the other gods were not amused that, he let this guy and his family escape. And I'm glad these gods aren't real, because if they didn't like the amount of noise back then, imagine what they would think if they turned on MTV. Oh, I can't even stand that noise. No, we're not going there. Anyway, okay. Now, when we read this Torah portion, we see an entirely different situation. We see a God that doesn't mind the noise. He tells us, be fruitful and multiply. He wants families. He wants people to get married. He wants people to have children. But what he hates is violence. And the Bible says that people's hearts were continually turned towards evil. So instead of a God who needs his beauty rest, we have a God who never slumbers nor sleeps. A moral God who hates injustice, cruelty, and all sorts of evil. When our God destroys, it is not for selfish reasons, it's to preserve life and righteousness. So God cares for us and wants us to do good to one another according to his standards. Now, things must have been horrible for God to only spare 8 people. Now, we're going to skip ahead a little bit from the Mesopotamian flood epics. And because this isn't a Bible lesson, I teach in context here, and so I'm going to skip through and teach you the cool stuff, the stories between the stories about life, what life was like back then, and how it makes the scriptures make sense. So we're going to skip forward to something kind of strange that happened between Noah and his son Ham. All right? I mean, it only seems strange because we don't understand what it means to honor your parents. In chapter 9, verse 18, the Bible tells us right off the bat that Ham is the father of Canaan. And Canaan will be very, very important later on, so remember his name. Now, it also mentions this in verse 2. Ham is the father of Canaan. I think the Bible wants us to know that Ham is the father of Canaan. Anyway, so I don't know if Canaan was born right after the flood or what, but when the terrible events of chapter 9 happen, Ham is already a father. It says so twice. So Noah made a bad mistake. And I got to tell you that the people in Scripture, a lot of righteous men and women do wrong things. But being righteous isn't being about being perfect. Being righteous is about when you do wrong, making it right afterwards, okay? Righteous is about making things right. Sometimes when we've done wrong. It's about doing what is right, even if we do what is right in retrospect after we've already done wrong. I remember that too. That's important. Anyway, so Noah made a bad mistake after the flood, and we know it was years after because it takes a while to grow grapes and to get enough to cultivate to make wine. Well, Noah got drunk. And he got drunk enough that he fell asleep in his tent naked. Okay? Now his son Ham came in and saw, and instead of being a loving son and covering his father up and preserving his dignity, he went outside and told everyone. Okay? I mean, you wouldn't want anyone to do this to you. You'd be embarrassed. You'd be humiliated. It's a horrible thing to do to somebody that you love. So in the ancient world, and even in a lot of the world today, even though it's not in our society, in American society, or in Western society, a man's honor was his most important possession. Okay? More important than his life even, but honor in those days didn't mean what we mean. We say if a man's honorable, we say he has an inner quality that tells him what the right thing to do is, and he always acts on that. That's not the ancient definition of honor. Man's honor was his reputation with everyone. So you could be an honorable man in the eyes of the world and still be a really nasty jerk. Okay? So Ham dishonored his father's reputation by telling everyone how shameful his father's behavior had been. He embarrassed his father in front of everyone on earth. At that point, can't get much worse than that. Now, when Noah woke up, he would know very quickly exactly what had happened because of how everyone was acting, and somebody would have told him. In ancient societies, when somebody was mocked, even a grown-up, children would mock them. Now, the Bible doesn't say, but I wonder if this is exactly what happened, because the first thing that Noah does is curse his grandson, Canaan. Notice he doesn't curse any of the other sons of Ham, or even Ham. Only Canaan. After all, some of Ham's sons go on to found some of the greatest empires in human history. So they certainly weren't cursed. In an honor-shame culture, a child who purposefully brings shame onto an adult would have been dealt with harshly, and yes, even cursed, which is another word for disciplined. No one in that culture ever mocked or ruined the reputation of their father or their king lightly. People were required to respect their elders within their clan. That Noah was mocked at all shows that Ham was an incredibly disrespectful person and that he had raised his son, Canaan, the exact same way. This doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but for them, it was one of the worst crimes there was. On TV today, You can see kids disrespecting and dishonoring and embarrassing their parents all the time. You can go to the store and you can see kids embarrassing their parents and not even caring. But in those days, it just didn't happen. It wouldn't happen. If Noah hadn't acted harshly against Canaan, then no one in his family would ever respect him again, and the family would fall apart because they wouldn't have a patriarch. In some ways, Noah was like the king of the world because he was everyone's father or grandfather or great-grandfather. Okay? Does that make sense? I hope so. Like my teacher Rico would say, are you with me? Good. Anyway, one more thing, and then we're going to go straight to chapter 11 in the building of the Tower of Babel. We're going there now. Get a little confused. Okay, so God told everyone to spread out, right? But they refused, and they decided to build a tower on the plain in Shinar. What they built was probably a ziggurat, and I'm going to show you a picture while I talk about it. So this is the beginning of what was known as Babylon, and Babylon means one thing more than anything else. I went through the Bible and I looked at every reference of Babylon, and I found out that it means commerce, but it also means government that is in defiance of God. As we'll see in upcoming weeks, Egypt is equated with idolatry, the worship of false gods, and so is Samaria. And we'll get into that in future years about Samaria, because that doesn't happen until they're already in the land. So, that's what they were doing in building this tower. There was this first century historian. He lived at the same time as Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus did. And he said in his book that they built the Tower of Babel not to worship gods like they would do with a normal ziggurat, but so that they could build a building that was so high that if God flooded the world again, that they could stay up at the top of it and ride out the storm. I don't know how much room they put up there, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, God had promised he would never flood the earth again. So the people building, and it says they, it doesn't say anything about any leader or anything. It says the people all got together and did this. Okay? So, one, they're calling God a liar. Two, they're saying that they can outsmart him. That's not smart, really, on a number of levels. So, anyway, they built it high. So they figured that they could outsmart God. You can't send water this high. Whatever. Okay, but it says that they made it out of bricks. Okay, now why does it mention that they made it out of bricks? Well, a really cool thing is if you go and visit Iraq, which I don't recommend, actually, stay away. So if you were to visit any of the archaeological sites in Mesopotamia, you would notice that everything's built of bricks. If you go to Israel, you notice that things are built of rocks. Why? Israel is full of rocks. And Mesopotamia isn't. Mesopotamia is sandy and muddy and clayey. And so they have to build with bricks, whereas Israel can build with rocks. Matter of fact, I'm going to show you a picture of a rock here. It's in the Western Wall of Temple. It's called the Master Course. And I'm trying to think of the dimensions. I know at the tallest, it's 11 feet high. It's 15 feet deep, and I think it's 41 feet long. I'll make sure when I'm doing the editing on this that I get the right dimensions, but this thing weighs so much, and it was cut out of rock far away and brought. This is how big the rocks available to Israel were. Mesopotamia didn't have that. Anyway, so you can imagine how many bricks these guys had to make a tower that reaches to the sky. So that's all for this week, and I hope you learned a lot, and we'll see you next time for Torah portion Lech Lecha. which is the life of Abraham, and we're going to learn why he cut all those critters in half. It's so gross, but it's totally cool. Anyway, now, do you enjoy context? I hope you're enjoying context. If you are, I'd like you to check out the first book of my family curriculum, Context for Kids, available through Amazon.com. And while you're there, check out Sarah Hawk Valente's Lessons from Yeshua's Torah, which will take you through the Torah portions that we're covering together. So her book will help you follow along with what I'm doing, and you can start it at any time of the year. Now then there's Torah Puppets, which is some zany fun teaching the biblical foundations of our faith from my friend. Now working together, we can make learning not only fun, we can also keep your kids from being swept to and fro by every wind of doctrine. So I hope you'll be back next week. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that you caught last week's Torah portion, and I hope that you caught our special Thursday prayer report, because I'm hoping that we can pray together on Fridays about whatever the concerns are. But we'll have to see how it's going, because I haven't exactly figured out what I'm going to do yet. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.